Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. You know, we're all wired differently. We all think differently. We can look at the same thing and reach different conclusions. We can be in the same conversation and hear different things, right? We can be preparing for the same event and just interpret what we have to do and what's expected of us differently. I was really struck, and this is just a commentary, I was really struck in looking at the Derek Chisora versus Vitaly Klitschko Box Nation face-off, which I think is a great face-off, by how different the two men were. Derek Chisora, who is very smart, very articulate, actually talked about how he doesn't even know who the other heavyweights are. He doesn't study films of other heavyweights out there. Apparently, he's only focused on the guy he's going to fight in his next fight. And there's a moment in the exchange where Vitaly Klitschko, who's very cerebral and who is what I call schematic, right, thinks in abstractions. Vitaly Klitschko, amused, leans across the table and says to Derek Chisora, "How are you going to beat me? Tell me what you're going to do, because I believe that I'm not only the more fit fighter, but I believe that I am the better technician in the ring," right? Because that's how Vitaly Klitschko thinks. As great an athlete as he is, as big a punch as he is, he's there looking at Chisora. For him, it's not about courage or manhood. It's literally about technique. And he says, "I'm the better technician in the ring." Then later he says, "How are you going to beat me? You're going to beat me long?" And he's trying to get Chisora to talk about his strategy because, of course, that's what Vitaly Klitschko thinks is important, right? He sees Chisora as a bunch of math equations. And his strategy isn't to go in and be braver than Chisora or to be the better man that night. No, his strategy is literally a set of maneuvers that he's going to execute in the ring, right? He already knows how he's going to fight Chisora. I know in the video he says differently, but he already knows the strategy he's going to use to fight Chisora. He studied Chisora. He already knows what Chisora is going to do, right? And for fight fans watching this video, that's to put his head down, throw looping punches, try to land shots on Vitaly's chin. You know, it's no surprise, obviously, when Chisora says, "I'm going to come after you. I'm going to try to, beat you up from the inside. You know what I do," right? Chisora's interpretation of the sport is he's going to be braver that night. He's going to come in. He's going to do what he always does to beat Vitaly Klitschko. I don't think Chisora is even thinking in terms of the technical strategies that Vitaly Klitschko is thinking about, right? Put in a different context. When I was younger in the 1980s, I was always amazed watching the Los Angeles Lakers. They called themselves Showtime at the time. And they had a point guard, Magic Johnson. And I was always amazed at how Magic would, in a fast break, never move his head. He would just run down the court, dribbling the basketball, but yet he always knew where everyone on the court was, right? He could literally throw it behind him, and there was some Laker who was there ready for the pass. He could throw an alley-oop ahead of him, and he knew that Cooper, his teammate, was going to come on a Cooper loop and would be right there, right? He could fake, he could do this, he could do that, and he knew when guys were in the corner and when guys were off at the side. And it wasn't something that other point guards knew. In other words, this wasn't something that was self-evident to everyone on the court, right? Magic Johnson knew it when he left the court. The backup point guard wasn't Magic Johnson, right? Even if the Lakers worked on this stuff in practice, the other point guard just didn't have the whole thing mapped out in his head, right? I saw the same thing years later when I saw a Dallas Maverick young guard named Jason Kidd. Same type thing. Jason Kidd and Magic, almost the same person, right? Jason Kidd just intuitively knew where everyone was on the court. In other words, the game, apart from the players on the court, was happening in Jason Kidd's head, right? Again, it's a schematic approach where you're out there and you can close your eyes and know where everyone is on the field of play, right? Now, let me just say, in the NFL, we saw 3 quarterbacks this weekend who can close their eyes and they know where everything is on the field, right? The secret to Tom Brady, Eli Manning, and Drew Brees is that the receivers can change, right? Rob Gronkowski is not making Tom Brady. Tom Brady's making him. The receivers can change. There can be new receivers, right? Eli Manning, 1 minute is throwing to Plaxico Burress and Amani Toomer. Now, wins a Super Bowl. Now, he's throwing to Victor Cruz and Hakeem Nicks, right? The identity of the receivers almost doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that these guys just schematically know where these receivers are and can quickly, and I mean in milliseconds, digest the blitz package coming at them, right? They just know it. It's in their head. How they interpret the sport requires them to know where everyone is. It's a point guard mentality, right? It's as if Magic Johnson or Jason Kidd is playing quarterback, right? They just know where everything is. I think in boxing, just as an aside, right? If you watch a Floyd Mayweather fight, it's clear from early in the fight that Floyd Mayweather, whatever he says, I don't care what he says, whatever he says, he knows early on, even in fights when he has to make adjustments, what the other guy's going to do, how he's going to combat it. He has a strategy already, right? He just intuitively knows things. Now, that intuitive grasp, which I think is harder to achieve than a physical advantage. In other words, I can go out and work on quickness and things like that, right? I can learn to alter my technique a little bit to get out the starting blocks faster, if it's track and field or what have you, right? But the intuitive feel, where I step on a football court and I know what the first receiver is going to do, the second receiver, the third receiver, the tight end, the running back out the backfield, right? That intuitive feel where I show up and I look at the defense and I immediately, after the ball is snapped, let's say it's a Dom Capers type scheme, know that it's a zone blitz and that these guys are coming and that means that my third receiver is going to be open in the flat, right? I believe that intuitive feel is something you either develop early on or you don't, right? The secret to Magic Johnson and Jason Kidd is that if you go back and if you look at them in college, you'll see that they already had things mapped out, right? Eli and Peyton Manning, 2 schematic guys. If you go back and look at their rookie years, when both guys threw a bunch of picks, you're going to see that they were still then trying to throw the ball around the field, right? I saw TJ Yates yesterday trying to force feed Andre Johnson every 5 minutes, right? I saw, in fact, every other minute. If you look at the 49er box score, I know it's a 49er love fest right now. Alex Smith threw for less than 300 yards against a defense that's not that great, right? Greg Williams' Saint defense blitzes a lot. I believe Vernon Davis had something like 9 or 10 catches, right? Alex Smith was throwing to Vernon Davis, right? That was a huge portion of his passing yards. Now contrast that with what Drew Brees did against presumably one of the league's better defenses. Three different Saints had over 100 receiving yards, right? Drew Brees is not out there throwing to the dominant receiver. No, he's out there throwing to the open receiver. And he's able to quickly figure out who that is because he has their routes in his head, right? So even when the Niners are, bringing Justin Smith and Alton Smith, I mean, big time players, even when the Niners have you under a ferocious pass rush, Drew Brees is literally able to do a check down in his head and know where guys are going to be, right? Tim Tebow, who's been in the NFL now multiple years, doesn't have that skill. He's a great kid. He's talking about learning the game. Let me just say this. First off, whenever the announcers start to say, oh, he's a great kid, you know something's wrong. Okay? Because when you're talking about a guy who has it figured out, who's a dominant athlete, let's say Adrian Peterson, no one wastes their time talking about Adrian Peterson being a great kid, right? Hardcore football fans and gamblers, we want results. It's a performance-based league, as Bill Parcells says, right? And when you see the real deal, when you see Drew Brees out there, you don't waste your time talking about whether he's a great kid or not. You know this guy is a dominant quarterback, right? Forget the great kid part or great man part. You focus on the great skills, right? You only default to, oh, he's a great man, he's a great kid, when you can't default to the great skills, right? And so let me just say this. There's a soft criticism of Tim Tebow, but I actually think it is an overlay on a deeper truth. And that truth is, as hard as Tim Tebow tries, and he can try awfully hard, there's a mental part of the game that he hasn't developed, most don't, that the elites have. In other words, Tim Tebow is a great athlete. Look at him. He runs like a fullback. He looks like he hits the weight room. He's in shape. Urban Meyer's coach at Florida says that Tebow was the first one in and the last one out, right? His leadership skills are obvious. I'm sure there isn't a teammate that he has who doesn't view him as a hard worker. Compare and contrast what's happening in the New York Jet locker room, where everyone's taking a shot on Mark Sanchez, with the Denver locker room. Team loses, not a single Bronco comes out with negative comments about Tim Tebow because they know he's in the foxhole with them, right? He has the leadership skills. Here's what he doesn't have. He doesn't have that Magic Johnson ability to think in the abstract. That wiring that, quite frankly, guys like Eli, Drew, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Kurt Warner developed from the first time they stepped on a football field, because their interpretation of the sport was one where you have to know where people are at all times, right? So that allows them to show up in the playoffs, to see a defense with some wrinkles, and to still know where a Hakeem Nicks is, a Jimmy Graham is, right? A Rob Gronkowski is, and Aaron Hernandez is, right? These guys know where the players are, right? I mean, and they're not deterred. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, all I could say is he got the ball to his receivers. They dropped many of his passes. But the one thing someone watching that game knew was that Aaron Rodgers knew where his receivers were, right? There's no question about that. The game wasn't too fast for Aaron Rodgers. And that's with Jason Pierre-Paul, Justin Tuck, Ozzie coming at him. Aaron Rodgers knew where his receivers were, right? That's a huge part of his preparation for the game. Can we say that about Tim Tebow? The Patriot defense, not a lot of Pro Bowlers, not a lot of great numbers, right? Tim Tebow completely befuddled, right? Can we say that Tim Tebow is hitting a lot of wide receivers? Tim Tebow is a great athlete. You know what? Cam Newton is a great athlete. Compare and contrast their passing numbers, right? You can be a great athlete and yet still have an intuitive understanding of where everyone is, right? Tim Tebow doesn't have that, and I'm just here to say it takes years to develop that, right? And the elite quarterbacks, just like the elite point guards, Jason Kidd, Magic Johnson, the elites have it developed to the point where it's second nature, right? They just know. Kobe Bryant is a great athlete. I'm not here to say differently. But Kobe Bryant has never passed like Magic Johnson, nor could he, because Kobe Bryant has really practiced his own moves and his own skill set, how to beat a guy one-on-one, how to jump high and do this and that. He hasn't approached the sport like a Magic Johnson has. That's a different personality profile, right? I'm just here to say the kind of quarterbacking that Eli, Drew, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers are doing, Phillip Rivers, that kind of quarterbacking is literally a different personality profile than Tim Tebow's, right? And I don't care if Tebow spends every hour of every day between now and next year. You tell me, and I agree he's an underrated quarterback, but he has a ceiling, right? You tell me, how is Tim Tebow, how can you teach a guy how to think like Magic Johnson? I'm not sure if it can be done. That's like trying to teach a guy how to think like Warren Buffett. I mean, understand, a Magic, a Jason Kidd, a Drew Brees, these guys have spent their entire careers developing a cerebral approach. Their entire careers. They're several years into spending every day consciously adjusting their thinking on where everyone is going to be on a basketball court or a football field. How could Tim Tebow, in a matter of months, suddenly develop that level of understanding? I don't think it happens. And, Tim Tebow, as I said before, he's a nice kid, but there's a ceiling on what he's doing, just like there's a ceiling on what Michael Vick is doing, right? These guys just haven't interpreted the sport in a way that allows them to know where everyone is. They've relied on a different skill set. And because the game at the top level is mathematical, it's cerebral, it's seeing things without looking at things, I think Tebow's going to have problems. Let me know what you think. Leave your comments for me here on YouTube. Visit us at gamblersadvisory.com and dwyerfootball.blogspot.com. Thanks for watching.